Start to share.
And then when we get the message, yes, now we are getting the message that the recording has started. Okay, well, welcome again for the training session about forms and landing pages. Well, I'll give the floor to Hannah.
Thank you so much. So thanks again for joining again. It's another exciting one for me because I love all the sort of techie side of things, but forms and landing pages, and there's a lot that we can do with forms and landing pages in Pardot, and not everyone realizes the amount that we can do. So initially I'll start with forms and then we can move on to landing pages. So if I thought I'll just go from the beginning and we can just create a form together. And that might be the easiest way of explaining how we go forward. So I'm just going to cancel that because it thinks I'm in something else. And start again. Okay, so we're going to name the form. We can add any tags that we want to. If we're utilising tags, we can add them here. We can select the folder. So when we're using scoring categories and folders, we want to select the correct folder. Just so you know, I'm actually in our dev account. I'm not actually in LR's account, just because we've got some assets that I can show that we might not have in the other account, just for ease and to be able to show what we can do with landing pages. So we've got the tracker domain that will usually default to the primary, but we can select alternatives. So if we've got more than one tracker domain in the account, that's where we can change that. And then we can choose a campaign, which for the time being, I'm just going to choose test. And then I'm going to click next. So here, all forms will automatically pull these in. We can remove any that we want to if we don't need them. The only one that we have to keep in is email. So we always have to capture that regardless of any other fields that we've got in the account. Apologies, my screen just went a bit squiffy. So we've got first name, last name, company and email. So I'll just click into here and start explaining the different tabs that we've got within the fields. So the first tab is basic, and this is where we can add a label for the first name. So we might actually just want this to be name. We might not want it to say first name. And basically this is what the prospect will see when they actually arrive at the form. The prospect field is what we want to map to. So here, this is pulled in first name, which is the default. The type, so this is the type of field. So we've got a few different types. We've got text, date, checkbox, radio button, drop down, text area, and also hidden. So generally we would normally be using text. We'd even use that for email generally, and the checkbox and the radio button and the drop down, they all come with predefined values, so they're actually really useful if we want to keep certain fields for reporting, if we want to keep them consistent. So for example, if we're looking across certain industries, we can keep all of the spelling exactly the same. And make sure that people are selecting those rather than typing free text into the field. Then we've got date. Oh, sorry. Someone got a question.
Hannah, I have one question.
Yes. Sure.
How does the radio button look like? I never used it actually, so
sure.
I was just curious.
I've actually got a form here. So this is a radio button. So
okay.
The difference is a checkbox. We can select multiple. If we choose to, whereas a radio, it will be one or the other, or however many radio buttons we have there.
Okay.
So
yeah,
brilliant. Data format. like I said, generally this is normally text. We can choose number. If we choose number, we just have to bear in mind that for a telephone number, for example, if we're using plus 44 or whichever country code we're using, this will actually then cause it to fault, and it will show it as an error. So if we're using a phone number field, we would normally stick to text, which sounds a bit odd, but that's the best way to move forward with that. Then we do have data format email, and we can actually specify whether we want to check whether the email is coming from a valid mail server. And we can also not accept emails from ISPs and free email providers. So, for example, if we don't want Gmail and Hotmail addresses entering the system, we can actually select that, and they won't then be able to enter them. So we also can say whether we want the field to be required or not. And that's just simply checking and unchecking that box there.
Hannah, one question about the data format.
Yes.
So you showed us the two options below. It means for the for example, email not from ESPS and free email providers. If you tick that, it means that if someone has a Google address, he or she can't fill in the form. Do you mean with? Yeah.
So basically, it's looking for particular domains. So business domains and things. So if it's classed as like a personal email, so like the free email providers like Hotmail and Gmail, etc., if it's classed as one of those, it will then reject it, and it won't allow them to actually enter it. So if we don't want to use that, we can just select email, but we do have those options if we want to filter them out.
Okay, and you normally do that then in the email field, or or you do it?
Yeah, that would be
every
email field. Yes.
Okay.
So moving on to the advanced tab, the error message, generally this is populated with this field is required. If, for example, we had selected the option on email to not accept ISPs, we might want to personalize this just to explain why it was being rejected and say that we need a valid email address. CSS classes, these are actually identified in the layout template that we choose. So if we've got a form, for example, I've got this one here, this isn't an LR form. Here we have fields that are sitting side by side. So we've actually said we want these to be 50% width on desktop. But then if I just go to inspect and look on a mobile, or not, that's not wanting to, that's a bad example. So basically what we can say is if it's a desktop, we want them to sit side by side, 50%. However, if it then goes to mobile, we want them to go to 100% width and stack below each other. So if we do that, this is where we would add it in. As you can see, I've been working with other classes on previous forms. So not everything will be coded the same. So basically, we would need to check with whoever created the template as to which class to enter here for that to enable the form to sit the way we want it to. So, for example, we use width 50, but another coder may say 50%. So we just need to make sure we've got that accurate for the class to work.
Okay. I can also see that we have a question in the chat from Maya. Is it possible to associate a segmentation list to a radio button as we usually do with a drop-down?
Yes. So by that, do you mean when they select a certain value, we can add them to a list? Is that what we mean there?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, we can do that with radio buttons.
Okay.
So we then have a description field. So this, if we want to put any kind of description about the field and give sort of hints as to what people might need to enter here, we can actually pop a description here and it will just sit below that field. So it's just another prompt for people if we need to add that additional information. Then these three here, these are to do with how the data is displayed and how we then capture further data. So always display even if previously completed. By default, this is always unchecked when we create a new field. So for example, if I go to fill in a form and I fill in my first name, last name and email, if this isn't ticked, when I then come back to fill in that form again, it will only display my email. The reason for that is email always displays, that's default, and it has to be on the form. But because this is not ticked, it won't then display it because I previously completed it. So if we ever see things like that with forms and we're thinking, where's that field gone? It's this checkbox here. And then we've also got do not pre-fill. So do not pre-fill is useful for things like comments fields. So if we've got a form that customers are filling in more than once and we want them to be able to replace the comments that were there and we don't want to pre-populate the previous comments, we would check this box, and that would then mean that it's blank each time we arrive at the form. And then we've got also maintain initial value upon subsequent form submissions. So this would actually mean that we would overwrite any new information that was entered. And I've just spotted a question there. Sorry. So is there a list available of different codes and their meanings? So with the CSS classes, that would be down to the layout template, which I can briefly show a layout template later in the training, and it's basically all coded into that template. So that list would come from whoever built the template, if that makes sense. So because we can literally name them whatever we like. There's no sort of standard. It just depends on who's built them.
I don't think we have that at this moment. We do have templates, of course, but I don't think we have a list of the CSS clauses, what you can enter. But
yeah, what I mean is
something to investigate.
Sorry, what I mean, the form that I'm making now, it has a layout which I have to change. And I see that there are different kinds of codes that you can use in this field. So I thought maybe there's a list of all codes that you can use and what they actually do. Yeah,
so it would be whoever built that template could provide that. If it was one that we built, we can definitely provide that. But yeah, it just depends who built the original template, because it's however they've worded it, if that makes sense.
Okay. Yeah, I understand. Okay, thank you.
No worries. So I will skip the values field for the time being, because that's only applicable to certain fields. And I'll just move on to progressive profiling. So this one's really useful. I'm not sure if there's, I mean, there probably are some out there, but I think it's quite unique to Pardot, this one. So we can only show certain fields if the prospect has already completed a previous field. So for example, if we have captured first name and last name, and we think, okay, now we want to move on to a job title, we can hide first name and last name and just ask them to fill in their job title, but it will only appear if we've already captured that data. So this is a really good way of keeping our forms short so that we can increase the conversion rate, but also we can over time collect more and more data to build up a profile of that person. So if we were to select this here, we would say, okay, we only want to show this field if email has been completed or if company has been completed. So we can literally do it on any of the fields other than email, like I said, because that one always has to display.
And one question here, if we link it to required fields, then you have a problem, right? So if fields only show up when someone enters the correct question, enters the correct answer, sorry, then and if then fields show up which are required, then they don't show up when people don't choose that answer. So then the required field isn't completed, and then you have a problem, right?
So the required field will always display. What will happen is if we've got data in that field, it will still display with that data, but we will then add the next, so the field will appear on the next time so both will appear, if that makes sense. So we know we've captured that, so it would just stay there, and the additional field. So for example, with this, we've got first name, last name, company, email. If we said, okay, company is going to be mandatory, but once we've got company, we want job title, they would all still appear, but the next time you come to the form, job title would appear, but it wouldn't appear the first time, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. And then in this example, a job title, you can't make it required.
Yes, yeah,
right?
So we can make it any of them required. Job title, let's just go through it and I'll show you. So if we want to say, okay, job title, make it required, and we're going to make it dependent, and we're only going to, so I'm sorry, I've done that the wrong way around, so let me just cancel that, save the changes. So we go into the company dependent, and we're going to say, okay, when this field equals, now this is ideally we would use on drop downs, because we can then specify exactly exactly what we want it to say, but we can say then show job title. It's not going to, so do you know what? Sorry, I'm so sorry. I'm in dependent fields, not progressive. We were on progressive profiling. That's why it's not. So bear with me. I'm so sorry. It's been one of those days. So job title, progressive. So we only want to show this field if company has already been completed. So it's greyed out there, but it is still required. So it won't show unless it's been filled in, but then when it has been filled in, it will become required and it will display.
Okay.
Sorry, I went around about the houses then with that, but hopefully that made sense.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So dependent fields, which is one that we just out, what I will show is if we add in country, and we then add in state, for example, and territory. So these are obviously based around the US and Canada, but we can say, okay, well, if this field equals US, and we want to show the state field, and we can add another to say if it equals Canada, then we want to show the territory field. So now, until this is selected, these will not display, but once it is selected and it's either the US or Canada, it will display these fields. So they're relevant to what the person entering the form, relevant to the values that they've entered. So does that all make sense? Anyone got any questions on that? No? Okay. So just checking to make sure I've gone through everything on those fields. I think so. So I will move on to the next section, which is the look and feel. So this is where the layout template that we were talking about, this is where we would choose how we want the form to look. So if I just, so this will have been pre-coded before we go to build the form. And then submit button text. This is whatever call to action we want to use. So we can use book now, send inquiry. So it all depends on what we would prefer to add in there. Then the above form section, here we've got the editor, which is very similar to the email editor that we were looking at on Tuesday. And we can add in images, we can add in text, and we can style it. And this will then sit above the form on the landing page. But once the form has been submitted, it will disappear. So if, for example, we have a logo that we want to appear above the form while it's displaying and after it's been completed, we would place that in the layout template. But anything that we want, so we've also got a below form section, for example. Here we might want to put the privacy policy. So we're displaying that for GDPR purposes, but once it's been submitted, we might not want to show that. So we can then just contain it within the form. So we also have styles. These generally at MarkLab, we keep these as default just because of the layout template is normally built to dictate how the form looks, but we can use these options. So we can choose font size, font family, colour, where the label sits, whether it's to the left of the field or above it, checkbox alignment, again, whether it's horizontal or stacked, same with radio button, and required field character. So here we can choose the default or a star. So it's worth bearing in mind that if these don't appear to be working, it's possible that the layout template is overruling them. So generally the layout template does consider all of these things, so we don't really need to use them. And then if we move on to the advanced, so kiosk data entry mode, this is really useful if we have, for example, we're at an event and we're capturing data and we've got one iPad and everybody's filling in the same form. We don't want that to be cookied and to overwrite each time someone fills it in. So if we select this, it means that it will not cookie the browser, and each time the form is filled, a new prospect will be created. So that's really useful for that type of thing. Then we have the option to include not you. So this is if a visitor, say for example, we send an email to a prospect, they forward that email on to a colleague, and that colleague clicks a link and then goes to complete a form. Because of the tracking within that email, Pardot will think it's the original person that received the email. So if we select not you, this allows that visitor to reset the form, and then they can enter their own details, because otherwise it may pre-populate with the original recipient. So that's, again, really useful. We generally do recommend for best practice to keep that switched on. And then enable reCAPTCHA. This is protecting us from bots, basically. So it's human validation. So we do have the option to add that as well. Any questions around this section, the look and feel? No? Okay, great. I'll move on to completion actions. So again, we've got the editor here. So this is where we can add thank you content. So we can just leave a message saying, you know, thank you for your interest. We'll be in touch soon. We can leave contact details if necessary. So if, say, along the lines of, if your inquiry is urgent, please call this number. So we can literally put any information we want in there as a thank you message. We also have thank you code. So if we're using Google conversion tracking, or we have any kind of JavaScript that we want to kick in when someone submits the form, this is where we would place that.
I wanted to add here that we do have that for different forms. So in case someone is searching for that, I can make sure that you have the correct code, but it's also on the on all the forms we are using at this moment.
So I can make a note to leave a screenshot of that in the notes if that will help.
Yeah.
So we know where that is. Okay. So then here we've got the option to always display the form after submission. So there's as standard, there's a 10-minute waiting period. So it will leave the thank you message there. If for any reason we don't want that to happen. So another example would be when we're using the kiosk form. We can actually disable that. Sorry, did you have a question then? No, okay, I thought you did. And then we can also redirect to a different URL instead of showing the thank you content. So if we've actually got a landing page that we want to potentially, say someone signed up for a newsletter, we can send them to a landing page that includes a blog feed. So it's got content and it can keep the prospect engaged. So there's, again, lots of different things we can do there. And then we have completion actions. So as you can see here, there's a long list of things that we can actually do based on the fact that someone's completed this form. So we can add them to a list, which might then add them to an engagement studio. We can add them to a Salesforce campaign, dependent on, so we might have a campaign for a particular page for a particular product. So we could add them to that. We can adjust their scoring category. So again, if it's on a specific page related to a scoring category, we can increase that or just adjust the overall score. This would be above and beyond the default scoring model that we have. We can also change field values, create Salesforce tasks. There's a lot that we can do there based off the back of completing a form. So this really shows the value of using Pardot forms.
I have one question here and also one other question. Is there like a best practice? What kind of completion actions are needed for example, an inquiry form or a download form also to make sure that the syncing does work well?
Yeah, so for a download, we might want to send an email with the download content. So we would then we would do that. So we have that option here, the send autoresponder email. Alternatively, if it sits with a particular team, the inquiry, and we know it's quite a warm lead based on the form that they've filled in, we can assign a task for someone to follow that up. We can assign it to a user. By assigning them to a user, this will mean they will sync with Salesforce. So if a prospect enters Pardot and they're not assigned to a user, they're not initially synced. And this is good in terms of best practice to nurture that prospect until they become a marketing qualified lead. So ideally, we don't want everybody going into Salesforce because, for example, if they've downloaded a white paper, they're not necessarily sales ready. So we can select certain forms and say, okay, we know if they've entered this, the details into this form, they're actually sales ready. So we can assign a user and they will be sent over to Salesforce.
Okay. Do we also have that in the guide?
I can add that
provide.
Of course.
Great. And something else I wanted to add is one of the options to if you move your mouse over, then you can see one of the options above the completion actions.
One of these, sorry.
The always display. So one of the radio buttons, but then always display form after submission. That specific tick box, for example, was very useful when we had training booking forms, and when someone wanted to book a training course, and then after that first booking, also another booking was needed. To make that happen, we use that tick box so that the form always displayed. and before that we had some complaints because people needed to wait, well, 10 minutes before they saw the form.
Yeah.
And by doing that, it was solved. So that was an example we did in the past
Brilliant.
to use that.
So yeah, so there is a lot we can do with them, which is great. And then moving on to next, this is basically just a roundup of what we've built. We can preview the form, which is probably not going to look, oh, it looks okay. Bit squiffy here. So yeah, we can preview the form, and then we can confirm or save, or we can go back and make any changes. We can also use these links here to go back to any stage that we need to. So I will just confirm and save that one. So I'm probably going to move on to landing pages now, because we'll talk about layout templates and landing pages. I don't know if form handlers would be of use. I don't think you guys use them, but we can take a look at those prior to the landing pages if that's useful.
Hi Hannah, it's Louise here. I've just got a quick question on completion actions.
Yeah.
So we find with some of our with our download form, sometimes when you click on, fill out the form and click download, it kind of hangs. So we often see like in the Pardot notifications where people have tried like multiple times to try and submit the form because it doesn't look like it's submitted. And people have said before that it's due to the completion actions running in the background, which kind of delays the thank you message displaying. And I just wondered if you had any tips on kind of balancing how we do the completion actions and get that information that we need with the kind of good user experience.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it would be good to get an actual example and be able to test the form, because I know with other clients we've got a fair few completion actions on forms and not necessarily experienced that happening. So it would be interesting to just have a look at the form and maybe go from there with that, because it shouldn't really be causing a delay.
Okay. Yeah, I can.
Yeah, sorry.
No. I can share an example separately.
Yeah, that would be great. And then we can just take a look and see if there's anything that stands out that might be causing it. But yeah, like I say, really, it shouldn't. The completion actions they happen after the submit has been obviously clicked, and that initially should then take you to the thank you page, and the completion actions they shouldn't be waiting for the thank you page, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So yeah, definitely. But I can imagine that's frustrating from a user perspective, and also the reporting side on the form. That's not ideal because we're going to look like we're getting lots of faults on the form.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Yeah, it's a very good point, Louise.
Same, if they experience the same thing, or if it's just us in the UK.
No, it's a very good point, Louise. I also know that we have that problem, for example, in NUR. Mm-hmm. That you can, that when you test it yourself, when you download something, sometimes you need to click again and again. So very good point. Something what is really strange.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, no problem. We can definitely take a look at that, because obviously we don't want to cause frustration for the customers. So yeah, it's an important one, definitely.
Thank you.
No problem. So would form handlers be useful, do we think, or would you like me to move on to layout templates?
We don't use it, but maybe in short, because it's always good to know in short a bit the basics.
So, I mean, what they do, form handlers they're for third-party websites. So where we're not using a Pardot landing page, we might want to, or a form, in fact, we might want to be consistent with a website. So to capture that data, we can use a form handler. So if I just go to create one, we have basically one window to do everything in. So we would name the form handler. I don't know what year it is. And we would select a folder. We can add tags as we can with a form. Again, we can choose a campaign so that it will all be collected in the same place. We do have the ability to use the kiosk data entry mode like we do with forms. We can enable data forwarding to the success location. This is basically, we have the data coming into Pardot, but we'll also be enabling the data to go to elsewhere. Oh, sorry, I just saw Christina's note. Sorry, that distracted me. No problem. So yeah, that will enable us to capture it in two places. And then disable visitor activity throttling and send autoresponders after every submission. So there's a little note here as to why we might want to do that. And basically we would do this, it's if the visitor, if we don't want to be sending the autoresponder literally after every submission, because they might, for example, be clicking more than once and it's going to continue to send autoresponder emails, we can disable that. So as default, it's on, so it won't send email after email after email. Whereas if we select that, it will disable it, so it would continue to send. Then we have a success location, which can either be the referring URL or a specific URL. So the referring URL will be dictated by the external website, and the success location here, for specific URL, we can actually specify where we want people to go to once they've submitted. And then same with an error location. So we have completion actions as we do with the forms, which is really useful. And then here is where we map the fields. So for example, if the external field name is first name, we want that to map to first name and data format to be text. And then we have advanced, which is the error message. And we can also choose that option to maintain the initial value. So if we want to not overwrite anything, we can select that here. And again, we can say whether it's required or not. So this needs to match up with the external form. So if it's required on the external form, we need to make sure it's required on the form handler, because otherwise we'll start to see errors and it won't sync across.
One question about this. Do you have experience, maybe it's a specific question, but do you have experience with form handlers and GoToWebinar? Because in GoToWebinar, you also have forms. Mm-hmm. So when I take a look at this, it would be interesting to know that we use, for example, the form in GoToWebinar, and that we just have one form handler to make sure that data syncs, if possible.
Let me look into that for you, because I personally haven't, and I know there's different ways of doing things. So let me ask Tom about that for you, because he'll know straight away the answer.
Yeah,
and, I've made a note of that.
Great.
And we can find out.
Great, thanks.
So yeah, I mean, one way we have recently used form handlers is one of our clients actually owns office spaces, and they wanted to use, it's a Pardot form, but we've used a form handler to identify which building someone wants to, they basically have a pay-as-you-go book a space type thing, and it identifies the building that the person wants to book a space in, and then the autoresponder goes to the correct person. So that's, it's using JavaScript, but that's another nice way of using them. So they don't have to be used for external forms, they can also be used for more advanced techniques like that. So if that ever came up, that's an option.
Okay.
So I will very quickly look at layout templates, because this is the code side of it, and it's very basic, this layout. If we go into edit the layout template, basically we can give it a name. We've got the folder that it can go in. Again, we can tag it if we need to. And then this is all the code that sits behind both a landing page and a form. So when we were talking about the CSS classes earlier, they're saved in here. So if I just find width 50. So here we've got width 50 outer. So this may not make any sense at all. But basically this is dictating what the form does. So depending on what has been typed in here will depend on what we need to type in the main form area. So again, whoever's built the form will be able to advise on the correct classes to use. But yeah, that's all. The layout and the structure, everything is all dictated by the layout template. So very brief view of the layout templates, but there's not a lot that we can go into without going into the code really. So I will then move on to landing pages. And I'll start from the beginning. We'll go into, does anyone want to have a quick break, a drink or anything just before I go into landing pages?
Yeah, maybe that's a good idea to have
Yes,
a 5-minute break for now. Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay. See you in 5 minutes.
See you shortly. Thank you. Hi, is everyone back now?
Hello.
Hello.
Maybe
Hello.
let's wait.
Yeah, I'm back.
Yeah. Okay.
Perfect.
Yes, great.
Great. So I just you can see my screen again. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, amazing. So we'll go from the beginning. We'll set up the name. We can add a tag, as we can tag literally everything in Pardot. We can add it to a folder. Then the title, this is what will appear here in the tab. So if we just say, for the time being, training session, and then the description is what will appear when the landing page is found through SEO searches. So this is important as well, to obviously encourage people to actually visit the landing page. We can choose a campaign. We have to choose a campaign, so that is mandatory. And again, we can choose a tracker domain. So if we're using different ones, we can select them there. We can also choose a vanity URL. So Pardot will generate a random URL for us to use, but if we want to say change that to the training session, this is what we will then see when we view the page. We can select an archive date. This is potentially useful for event landing pages. So we can say, okay, the event's going to be on Saturday. We want the page to archive the next day. And we can set that date there. And then we can also hide from search engine indexing. So if we don't want people to just fall upon the page via Google searches, we would select this and then it wouldn't appear. So that can be useful for things like if we've got a content download, and instead of sending an email with the download, we're sending them to a results page, we might not want that results page to be public, so we would select that. So any questions on that section at all? No? Great. So I'll move.
Yeah. Beth, I can see your question. When should we use the Pardot landing page instead of a website landing page? Yes. Well, I know, for example, for engagement studios, we have used Pardot landing pages, but we also have used AP server pages the last time. So for now, I believe, yeah, it's best to use AP server landing pages because it has the same look and feel as the other pages we are using. Yeah.
Perfect. So here we can choose if we want to create a new form, use an existing form, or no form at all. So we don't actually have to have one, but generally we normally would because we're trying to capture data. So just look for will be fine. And then we can actually redirect the prospect instead of showing the form's thank you content. So that's basically, we can send them to another page if we choose to. And if we move on to the content layout, this is where we're going to choose the actual layout template. There's a lot in here because it's our dev account, so excuse how messy it is. I'm typing the wrong thing. So I'm going to just choose this one as an example. And this automatically takes us to the editor, which is similar to the email editor, but also has differences. So with the email editor, we can add and remove sections. So we can duplicate, we can move up and down. We can't actually do that with a landing page editor. We can edit any content in there, but we can't move things around. So for this one in particular, the layout template dictates that the form is going to sit here, so that's where it populates. If I go in and select here, we can change everything that we can see. So if I was to double click on this, it's going to bring up the image properties box, so we can change the image as we would in an email. We can change the headline, the body copy, and then we've also got two options for images here. This one in particular has been designed so this is the desktop image and this is the mobile image, so literally everything we can see, even though the image is sitting behind the text, we can still edit it because of the way it's been encoded. So then moving down, again, we've just got another section here. This one in particular has also been coded so that we can use bullet points that are branded. So in the actual editor, it doesn't look as though they are, but if we were to add in a new one, save that, it's just going to populate that because the layout template is dictating what that's going to look like. This was actually quite a fun one. We actually put a little countdown timer in this one, so it's a good example of how flexible the landing pages can be. And then just further sections down here, we have a rotating section. So within this, if we click in here, we can change the content, and then we can actually change which one we want to edit depending on where we click in. So we do have the option, like we did with email, to look at the HTML, but we don't have to at all. We can just edit everything in the examples. And again, same with the footer here, we can change these so that they're all relevant. And as I said, the form populates. So this is dictated by the form that we chose. So if we wanted to change these fields, we'd need to do it in the form layout, not in the landing page, and that would then change what we can see here. So any questions on landing pages at all on the editor? No? Okay.
I have a general question actually, which is for everything. It's about tagging. Is it the right time to ask?
Yeah, you ask away. That's absolutely fine.
Okay, so in terms of tagging, sometimes we enter tags which haven't been registered as tags, if you know what I mean. Mm-hmm. And some other times we register them as tags through the admin section. What's the difference?
There isn't one really. We can create them both ways. They will all act the same way. They'll all be tags in general. So yeah, there's not a difference in how they behave dependent on where they're created.
Okay, so even if we insert it when we tag a page or a form or whatever, and we just enter a word, this tag gets registered as tag, although we haven't set it up differently.
Yes, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
No problem. Okay, so I will just go to the next page. And this is similar to what we saw earlier with the confirmation page. We're just checking everything is as it should be. We can preview the landing page just to check it, make sure it's all looking as it should, and then we can confirm and save. And that's then created. I say that's then created. Obviously, it would take a little longer to put actual content in. But one of the things actually, I know we've been working on the form for LR with the validation rules. So that's actually quite a nice example of here where we've got how would you like to be contacted, and then telephone becomes required. But if it's not selected, it's not required. And then this works in conjunction with the validation on the phone number. So it knows it's required. We've now typed that in, but it also knows that it's not valid. So we need to actually enter a valid number. So that's one extra thing that we can do with JavaScript in the background. So this here, I just wanted to show all the different types of fields. So we just, when we're designing the layout template, we just need to make sure we're covering all of the different types. If we do come to create a form and say, for example, the radio button doesn't look as we thought it would, it'll be because it's not being updated in the layout template. And this is just showing an example. This can be a live blog field that can pull through. So yeah, there's quite a lot of flexibility with them. So any questions on landing pages?
Yeah, well, I have one thing, yeah, what can be connected also with Engagement Studio, for example. Because I know that if we use a landing page, and if in an Engagement Studio you want to track who has submitted a specific form, that if you use a Pardot landing page, then you need to pick that Pardot landing page. And if we use an AP server page with a form, then we can track what has been done by adding a form. Do you mean what I understand, Hannah?
Yeah, I do. So that's in the reporting section. So if we go into marketing assets, so we've got two types of reports. We've got forms and we've got landing pages. I'll just open these up, and I think what you're meaning is if we have a Pardot form that sits on a Pardot landing page, all of the reporting sits on the landing page, so we won't see it appearing in the form. Whereas if we have a Pardot form that's sitting on an external page, the reporting sits in the form. Is that what you're referring to? Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I mean. And maybe you can show also within an Engagement Studio, even though Engagement Studio is another topic also, but just to link it with each other, maybe you can show the difference in an Engagement Studio, what you can pick, if that's possible, and that in an Engagement Studio there, you can decide to track forms or landing pages.
Yeah, sure. So whether someone's completed it or not.
Yeah.
Let me just go into Engagement Studio. I won't go through all of this because we'll go through this next week. But if we're actually listening for an event, so we've got these different events we can listen for here. So we can listen to see if a form has been completed. We can say any form or a specific form, and then we can say, was it completed or was it viewed? And then this is just a wait step to see how long we're going to wait to see if they did that. And based off the back of that, we can then send them down a different branch. Then we also have the option to do the same with a landing page. So any or specific, was it completed or viewed, and a wait period. So depending on where that form sits, depends on what we would choose in the Engagement Studio.
Yeah, exactly.
Does that answer the question?
Yeah, that's the short thing I wanted to show.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So yeah, we've got form reporting. So these are all the forms we've got set up. I'm just going to go into the training test form. And here we can see a report of views, unique views. So similar to like we've got with emails, we can see total and unique, submissions and unique submission rates, and then errors. So errors can occur if someone tries to fill in a form and they haven't completed a a field that's mandatory. So there can be different reasons, but if we start seeing this creep up, then we need to maybe have a look at the form and see if there's something that's actually preventing people from completing it. But from this we can see our sort of submission rate compared to views, and start to work out things like that. We have a nice graph that shows us activity, and then we see a list of prospects that have completed the form, and we can also download them as a list if we want to, and we have the option to select them and add tags, add to a list. We can delete them if we want to. I'm not sure why we would want to from a form fill, but it's in there. We can mark them as reviewed, or we can remove them from the list if we're trying to clean up the list of form fills. So yeah, there's those few things that we can do off the back of this report. And we can also change the date range. So we can say if we're only wanting to look from today right through to last year, or we can set a custom time if there's a specific time period that we're looking at. So if we're maybe experimenting with the call to action on the submit button, we might make a note of, okay, it was this from this date to this date, we changed it here, and then we can compare and see if that increased submissions. That's quite useful. And then landing page, I don't know if we've got, there's no stats in here, which isn't helpful, but basically this is very similar in what we just looked at for the form. It's just that we do need to bear in mind where the form is positioned to know where to look, because quite often people do look at the form and they think it's not been completed, but it's because it's on the landing page. So any questions on reporting? Anything that I haven't covered?
I don't have a question, but I also can't see other questions coming in. So
yeah, I mean, we obviously have the 2 hours allocated to this, but I think we've pretty much covered most of the things, unless there's anything glaring that's standing out. No, it's clear. Great. So any additional things that you'd like me to add to the documentation? So I'm going to look at the assigned to users for Salesforce. I'll add that in, so we remember to do that, and the thank you code section. Then multiple clicks on forms, the delay. I'm going to look into that for you with Tom. And GoToWebinar form handlers. Anything additional?
Yep. No, not at this moment. No.
Okay.
From my side.
Fantastic. So quite short and sweet, but yeah, there's probably a little less to go into than with emails, because there's quite a lot we can do with emails as well. So, but the next one is Engagement Studio, which is really good, and obviously you guys must be using them already. But yeah, there's things we can go into of how we can potentially A/B test, because there's not an actual function in the Engagement Studio to enable us to do that, but there's ways around it, so we can cover that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I can see one question coming in from Erika. Well, I would like to know more about the completion action. Sometimes I add CA or CR or content, and when I check delete, the CA completion actions are not applied. Yeah.
Okay. Again, it would be good to get an example of that, where it's happened, so we could have a look at why it might be happening. So it depends as well whether it's off the back of a form fill, or because we've got, obviously we can have completion actions off the back of an email send and different things. So again, we would probably need to look at it a bit more closely to see that specific example. If you could share an example, that would be great, and we can take a look.
Do we have that at the moment, Erika, or maybe we need to grasp it and ask it in an email? No problem. Okay, well, let's dive into that when we have an example. And I think the best practice guidelines you will add in the guidelines about completion actions is also helpful. Yes, of course, you can contact me, Erika. Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. Well, thank you everyone for joining me again. I hope that was useful. And showed a few different things that we can do with landing pages as well.
Okay, well, thanks a lot.
No problem.
And enjoy the rest of the day.
Same to
Thank
you.
you.
You too, ladies.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye. Bye.